I also want to thank place and acknowledge place and be with it. And although I have been introduced as a keynote, I want to say that I would like to unkeynote myself, because all I've heard in these 2.5 days has been wonderful. I have learned a lot. I have been humbled, and I really appreciate everything that has been done to bring us together. There's a lot of deep thinking in having put this together, and I hope to live up to what I have heard. What I'm going to present here is actually some ideas that didn't go into my book, Earth Beings, and because they didn't go into that book because I felt they will be long-term work in progress. And I think that even if published into a little book, the ideas in there will continue to be work and maybe not progress, but we'll continue to work them. So I changed the title of my, the original title that I sent to Tom, to Runakuna, human, but not only. And all those words mean, I write these in the presence of wonderful mentors. Mariano and Nazario Turpo, who really changed the way I think. What I think now is what they did to me. And speaking in their presence is talking in a way that they could recognize without feeling insulted. They called my attention many times when I said things and interpreted what they were telling me in ways that were insulting to them. So I also talk in the presence of mountains and lagoons and soils that are not only such, and animals and plants that are not only such. Not only is a refrain that will be very useful in this talk. Runakuna is the Quechua plural for gente in Spanish, that is people in English. And as I will explain in the talk, Runa, the plural, the singular, without the kuna is a pluralizer, Runa and human may not be the same thing. Runakuna have become human after 500 years of colonization. So that's my introduction, and I will start. I once told a customs agent who was quizzing me about the purpose of my presence in the UK, that I was there to talk about mountains that were not only such. A bit taken aback, but also trying to show he understood what I was saying, he asked, "Sacred mountains?" I responded cryptically, "That too, but again, not only such." He smirked, sealed my passport, and I left, giggling silently. An inconspicuous, if frequent phrase I learned to use not only as ethnographic conceptual tool in conversation with Mariano and Nazario Turpo. They would insist that what to me was, for example, a mountain, was not only that. Coming to terms with what was not only what to me was, in addition to taking time, required working at a permanent interface, a mutually inhabited relation, where the turpo's worldly practices and mine were both seemingly alike and at the same time different. And what emerged at the interface, rather than the entity or practice in question, was the awareness of our concepts and ways, the turpo's and mine, always exceeding each other as they also overlapped, relationally mutually other, and not only relentlessly so. In what follows, I will offer you the explanation that I left that customs agent without, and although I go into the 16th century momentarily and in speculative mode, I promise to connect it back with the ethnographic moment when I thought sacred mountains, but not only. So, on to the 16th century. It is impossible to take from them this superstition, because the destruction of these huacas would require more force than that of all the people of Peru in order to move these stones and hills. That's 1584. This quote by Cristóbal de Albornoz belongs to the process that I'm calling the anthropo-not-seen. A condition of possibility for the Anthropocene, I conceptualize the anthropo-not-seen as the world-making process by which heterogeneous worlds that did not make themselves through the division between humans and non-humans, nor necessarily conceived as such the different entities in their assemblages, were both obliged into that distinction and exceeded it. The anthropo-not-seen was the process of destruction of these worlds and the impossibility of such destruction. It includes the practices and practitioners of the will that granted itself the power to eradicate all that disobeyed the mandates to be human, as modernity in its early and late versions sanctioned, and the disobedient practitioners of collectives composed with entities recalcitrant to classification as either human and non-human. Initial obvious makers of the anthropo-not-seen were people like Cristóbal de Albornoz, a friar well known after his activities to extirpate idolatries, one of the practices from which the New World emerged as inhabited by redeemable humans and nature, all God creations. Earth beings is my translation for huacas, the entities that the Albornoz wanted to destroy. I met them as tiracuna. And that word, tiracuna, is composed of the Spanish tierra and its Quechua pluralization as cuna. So tierras, or earths, would be a literal translation. Intriguingly, the Albornoz translated huacas as stones and hills and identified their enormousness as the cause of the difficulty to eradicate what he considered a relationship of false beliefs. The extirpator's surprise and anxiety did not end with the enormity of the idols, for he also found out that people, while different from huacas, what the Albornoz called hills and stones, were also in continuity with them and could even become one. I want us to take this surprise into consideration, for the possibility of becoming huaca, translated by colonial friars and contemporary scholars as becoming rocks, speaks of the divergence between Spanish humans, the conquerors, and Andean people, or runacuna. And again, earth beings, I the local word, the Quechua word, is tiracuna, and that's made of the Spanish tierra, which means earth, and cuna, the pluralizer, so tiracuna is earths. Runa cuna, people, gente in Spanish. The singular is runa. I want to call attention to the cuna, which is not only a pluralizing, but a being-izer. So cuna makes beings. So I want to repeat what I just said. I want us to take the Albornoz' surprise at seeing that people could be in continuity with mountains, seriously. Because this surprise is telling us about the difference between what he was and thought humans should be and what Runacuna practiced, the way they practice being. So, risking anachronism for the sake of a thought exercise. In addition to replacing allegedly spurious beliefs with legitimate ones, which was what extirpating idolatries meant, the 16th century practice of extirpating idolatries might have included displacing the relational possibility of Runacuna becoming with Wakas, with a theological relational grammar that conceived of humans as distinct from nature. The friar's mission might have required making the human that conversion needed. And this human was not what the friars encountered, for Runacuna could become with Tiracuna and even become one. The colonial European expansion in the Americas denied humanity to each other. That is a usual assumption. But what if these were not only the case? The famous mid-16th century debate in Valladolid, let's remember, did not cast doubts about the humanity of New Worlders. The discussion was about the kind of humans Indians were and the kind of treatment that would best suit Spanish moral and economic interests as they converted them to Christianity. Neither of the two most prominent contenders, Sepúlveda or Las Casas, doubted Indians had souls. Rather, it was their having souls that made them potential prey of the devil. Defeating the danger required the eradication of Indians' idolatrous practices, including those of becoming Waka. In what can be a retrospective insight on what I have just said, and as he wraps up the order of things, Foucault writes, quote, taking a relatively short chronological sample within a restricted geographical area, European culture since the 16th century, one can be certain that man is a recent invention within it. That's the end of a quote that I'm sure many of you remember. Agreeing and expanding Foucault's Europe to its recently conquered territories, my proposal is that in the Andes, the emergence of man might have implied a colonial imposition, not the denial of Christian humanity on Runacuna, that entailed extirpating not the idols alone, but with them forms of personhood that could be continuous with Wakas. Disobedient persons or humans whose continuity with stones was enabled by the devil were persecuted and condemned to jail, death, and hell. The practice, not surprisingly coincided with the critical period of persecution of witches and so-called werewolves in Europe. Perhaps also Christian human-making practices. Befuddling the friars, the Andeans' disobedience, the entanglement, Runacuna with Tiracuna, continued if also changing historically. Today, 500 years after Cristóbal de Albornoz, Earth beings confront new eradicators. Mining corporations, agents of the Anthropocene, translate Tiracuna, this is Ausangate, the Earth being that I was introduced to and that I learned not to know. Today, 500 years after Cristóbal de Albornoz, Earth beings confront new eradicators. Mining corporations, agents of the Anthropocene, translate Tiracuna as mountains and a source of minerals and therefore wealth. Unlike their colonial counterparts, they have the power to remove mountains, redirect rivers, or empty lakes. In an article I published in 2010, I explained that protesting these extractive practices, Earth beings have broken into the public political scene as, quote, I'm quoting myself in that article, contentious objects whose mode of presentation is not homogeneous with the ordinary mode of existence of the objects thereby identified, end of quote. Earth beings as actors in the public sphere shock the onto-epistemic limit of politics. A scandalous presence, they need to be trivialized, mocked at. I stay faithful to what I then said. However, today, I would also extend the being contentious to the Runakuna with whom Tiracuna are made public. They, Runakuna, are also not homogeneous with the ordinary mode of existence attributed to humans. They are contentious to it. They are contentious to it, for in Ayllu, that's the word up there, they emerge inherently with Tiracuna. The Andean ethnographic record is replete with references to Ayllu as the collective possession of land by a group of humans linked by kinship bonds. Even national law can talk about Ayllu, as I just explained, a group of people owning land in group of people related through kinship, owning land through a relation of property. Obeying the grammar of conversion, Ayllu, in its current official legal and official political interpretation, has three distinct actors or components: humans, land, and the relationship between them. Human, land, relationship, connecting both. I say that Ayllu is this institution and not only. Thinking with disobedient grammars, Ayllu is also the intra-relation through which Runakuna with Tiracuna take place. That is, they become, in time and space, as a complex entity, a more than one, less than many composition, inherent to which is the relation that enables it. So in this composition, we don't have humans on the one side, lands on the other side. We have Tiracuna, Runakuna taking place. They are not without each other, and with each other, they happen, they take place. Time and space. As Donna Haraway says, it is important to consider what relations that think entities. And she takes this phrase from Marilyn Strathern. And now I want to say what I had not said in that 2010 article. Runakuna are contentious because as they become with Earth beings in the public political sphere, they are human and not only. Being inherently with Earth beings, when they appear in politics, their composition is not only that of humans representing mountains. Contentiously, they make present the disobedience Christianity declared could not be, the anthropo-not-seen, the human with that which the person so-called human could not be. Maybe instead of saying anthropo-not-seen, I should have said anthropo-not-been. I firmly believe that we have never been human, let alone man. This is a phrase in the introduction to the Haraway Reader. Again, this is a phrase that you may remember. It is also the title of the first section of When Species Meet. This, we have never been modern, is from When Species Meet. Others have discussed similar ideas. For example, in 2011, Dorian Sagan gave a talk at the AAA with the title, The Human is More Than Human. My title for this talk, Runa, Human but Not Only, is Fellow Traveler of Those Ideas. It bears similarities with Haraway's and Sagan's titles, yet my purpose is also other. For example, the human that Sagan's work evokes, like in the first conception of Ayllu, the official conception of Ayllu, the human that Sagan's work evokes, like in the first conception of Ayllu, is the one that can be relational separated from or brought together with the non-humans that he also evokes in that title. What I am saying here is that Runakuna and Tirakuna, or with Tirakuna, are not only these human and non-human. A caveat to avoid misunderstandings. I'm not trying to correct Sagan. I'm not saying he is wrong. My purpose is rather to contrast and genealogically connect the more than human or the non-human of those titles, of Donna's title and Sagan's title, with their excess. The disobedient Tirakuna with Runakuna, whose personhood together is enabled in a way that geology and biology, geology meaning the science that would know mountains, and biology, the science that would know humans. So my purpose is to join these human and non-human with the disobedient Tirakuna with Runakuna, whose personhood together is enabled in a way that geology and biology, respectively, do not exhaust. I first thought human but not only when requested to write a comment to How Forests Think, Eduardo Kahn's inspiring book. A passage in that book slowed down usual understandings of human and non-human. It read, Runa, the people with Eduardo worked, understand human and non-human sociality as one and the same thing. Confirming my need to slow down was the condition whereby a Runa, a person that we would call human, could be jaguar. The phrase could be with jaguar, and the phrase is pumayo, where the suffix "u" indicates with. And vice versa. The jaguar could be with human. So, and then he also wrote, where jaguars, Runa puma, or Runa persons are also dogs. And he called all these conditions transspecies pigeons. Transspecies pigeons. which I agree, they are, but not only. I insist because, I repeat, it matters what concepts think concepts, and where worlds meet, species may open up to partial connections with entities whose relational becoming is not only as species, at least not in its biological version. Next to the sentence that I read before, Donna Haraway writes, "In my view, people are human in at least one important sense. We are members of a biological species, Homo sapiens. That puts us solidly inside science, history, and nature, right at the heart of things." Tweaking this quote to my intentions, Haraway's sentence may also open up to what exceeds science, history, and nature, and thus to other than Homo sapiens ways of being, people or gente in Spanish. The indistinction between human and non-human society suggested by Pumayo, the composition Runa with Jaguar, or in the story I tell, Earth Beings with Runa Cuna, may also suggest that those entities are not only human and non-human in their Christian or biological versions. Another example, David Kopenawa, famous Yanomami shaman and Brazilian politician, in his recent book writes, "Today we're the same kind as those who gave us the name, those we give the name of game. Our inner part is identical to that game. We only attribute to ourselves the name of human beings by pretending to be so. Animals consider us their fellow creatures who live in house while they are people of the forest. This is what they say. Humans are the game that live in houses." These are neither isolated examples nor restricted to the Andes or Amazonia. Rane Willerslev, an ethnographer of Siberia, in an article suggestively titled "Not Animal, Not Animal," explains that the Yukahir hunter, Yukahir is a group of the people that he worked with, and the Yukahir hunter is usually a man, seduces his would-be prey, let's say an elk, by becoming it, but incompletely so, to maintain sight, incompletely so as to maintain sight of his own personhood, and thus avoid irreversibly becoming the elk he is after. Daniel yesterday talked about the shaman who, was it yesterday? It was before yesterday. Talked about the shaman who becomes a man-eating jaguar. So there are many examples, and I'm suggesting we should take them seriously. Okay, so I want to make a caveat here. First, I'm not talking about a pan-indigenous human metamorphic capacity to actually become animal or other than human, rock, animal, rock or plant. Rather, I want to rethink the relations that make those notions, human, animal, plant, rock, distinct, and the embodied grammar that they enforce, to propose that while currently hegemonic, they were also created as a universal condition that was not only obeyed. Second, and rather obvious, the Turpos, my friends, my mentors, the Runa people with whom Eduardo worked, the Siberian Yukahir and David Kopenawa are not saying or doing the same thing. Yet they all disobey human, animal, plant, rock taxonomic distinctions, and in so doing exceed society thus made while also being part of it. The human with Jaguar Pumayo, the hunter that needs to remember he's not the elk that would be his prey, or the human as the game that lives in houses, are both the we that has never been human because it has always been an inter or intra species relationship, and not only that we. And it has also been not only that we, because it has also been that which it could not be. And it may be this capacity to exceed society, to be unoccupied by it, while occupying it, even if at the margins, that makes Runakuna and others like them effectively, that is politically promising, impossible to society, yet dwelling within it, and also beyond its limits. They are powerfully frightening, because if we accept the challenge to think in their presence, they can offer the possibility for what I call onto-epistemic openings, which I define in a nutshell, an analytic practice of undoing the closures that make what we consider given, to consider that given a historical event in Foucault's sense, and open possibilities for what this event that would replace what was thought as given might not contain, while also being part of it. Not only the event human, mountains, animals, or biology or geology, also its excesses. To talk about Runakuna as not only humans is disturbing. I feel it. Anti-colonial anxiety haunts the idea and prevents further thought. Question the universality of nature to proceed with multinaturalism and provincialize non-humans is easier than proposing an analogous conceptual move for humanity that avoids culture. But in the spirit of the absolutely gargantuan task of decolonizing thought, I propose a question. Could the egalitarianism intimated in the unqualified equivalence between human and Runa, or other forms of being person, also carry the legacy of a colonial vocation that granted itself universal power to offer the human safe haven, sacred or secular, via universal rights, while banishing forms of personhood that this vocation could not recognize? The anthropo-not-seen is a way of talking of those forms of personhood, not the invisible subaltern human, but the disobedient compound person that was also what it could not be. Human, but not only. The Yucca hunter that's not animal and not animal. The elk that's not only animal, because it could also be the hunter. The anthropo-not-seen is a neologism that uses the opportunity of extractivist neoliberalism and the presence it has generated in Indian politics of unrecognizable beings to provincialize the human into uncommon nature, while also reckoning with a history that makes both human and nature globally hegemonic. Not only, and also the anthropo-not-seen and uncommon in nature, or the uncommons, are fellow travelers of what Marilyn Strathern called negativities, the mode of analysis she used to take into consideration the absence in her fieldwork site of certain categories, and then use such categorical absence to affect her analysis by, quote, creating contrast within our own language, end of quote. Absences, she said, and I quote her, create spaces that our analysis lacks, and can be used, in her words, to stop ourselves thinking about the world in certain ways. Similarly, I use absences to affect our conceptual language, but I also wish to do something else, perhaps more prosaic. My use of negativities, and particularly not only, wants to indicate that epistemic assertions make presences, for example, nature and culture, that may, the conditional is important, include the ontological denial, sometimes benevolent, yet always imperative, of what exceeds them. Onto-epistemic assertions, let's say nature, can make absence and impossible what does not fit them, while also creating room to tolerate those excesses. Once again, the historical moment is important. Nature and humans, as such, nature and humans, are not absent from Ayllu. Yet in extractivist corporate territory, their imperative assertion makes impossible all that exceeds nature and humans and the relation that separates them. In the best of cases, that excess is made tolerable as cultural belief, usually ignored, but as of lately, also extirpated via criminalization. Here's an example of the assertive will to make impossible what does not fit within it. And the guy down here is an ex-president of Peru who was very furious that Earth beings had become a presence in the public sphere because it interrupted his development project. And so this is what he said. We have to defeat those absurd pantheistic ideologies that believe mountains are gods and the wind is God. To believe that means to return to those primitive forms of religiosity that say, do not touch that mountains because it is full of millenarian spirit or whatever. Okay, if that's the case, we'd rather not do anything, not even mining. And this was 2011. He committed suicide. Not long ago, accused of corruption. He was going to be imprisoned. While speaking modern idioms that separate the sacred and the secular, the ex-president's words have uncanny resonance with the 16th century extirpation of idolatries that the Albornoz practiced. A difference that the colonial friar might have been jealous of is that extractivist corporations can actually remove the object of superstition. Another difference, and this one the Albornoz might have not liked, is that current extirpators have non-indigenous opponents. Alan Garcia's infamous remarks prompted disagreement from leading leftist politicians who accused the then president of racism and religious intolerance, and defended the right of indigenous peoples to their spiritual beliefs. Yet, when these politicians joined the defense of what they called indigenous sacred mountains, the Runakuna, living in the surroundings of the endangered earth beings, vacillated to consider their relations with Tirakuna as religion. Were Tirakuna sacred mountains? The answer was uncertain. Maybe, perhaps, but not only. As you may now suspect, this was a moment I had in mind when I responded to that UK customs agent. Negative qualifiers at the site of denials, a negation of the negation, may work as analytic ethnographic tool to open possibility for the presence of what the imperative assertion of the given made either absent or impossible. What the Peruvian ex-president and his leftist opponents asserted as indigenous religion, that is a relation between nature as supernatural and humans, those that lived around the endangered earth beings enacted not only as indigenous religion, that is, not only as a relation between supernature and humans. Their intervention, even if hesitant, disobeyed the petition that came along with the Christian and also secular conversion of Tirakuna and Runakuna into mountains and humans, and presented the relation between them intolerantly as superstition or tolerantly as worship of sacred mountains. I think of this disobedience as a worlding event, a political onto-epistemic opening performing Tirakuna with Runakuna and not only, for such composition is also humans and non-humans, mountains. This is a complex assemblage, each of these entities in this composition and the worlding practices that make them is more than just one of them, inseparably so. Dorian Sagan and Donna Haraway would say that in this assemblage, humans are more than humans and nature is more than nature. Mariano Nazario would add, not only. Included in the assemblage are Tirakuna with Runakuna. And all this slide is what I didn't have time to tell that UK customs agent. Another caveat, earth beings or the translation into sacred mountains are not a requirement for the emergence of disobedient political relational processes where humans are not only such. I missed that. In the northern Andes of Peru, a mining corporation wants to drain several lagoons to extract copper and gold. In exchange, they would build reservoirs, they say. Organized as guardians of the lagoons, local people define the mine's intentions, and many have died in the process. I have not heard of the presence of earth beings in this struggle. Yet, a relation of becoming with place may help think a situation that has been explained away as mere stubbornness. An iconic guardian of the lagoons is a peasant woman whose plots the corporate mining wants to buy to fully legalize its access to the territories it plans to excavate. The woman, whose name is Maxima, refuses to sell, and probably for an amount of money that she would otherwise never see in her lifetime. Countless times, the National Police Force hired by the mine has destroyed the family's crops, attacked her and her children, even her animals. About a month ago, they destroyed a trout farm, small trout farm that they had built with the money from the Goldman Prize. Her responses, as I asked how she could stand it, why did she stay, were, how can I be if I'm not this? The words with or land is not uttered. Instead, feet are stumped, not this. And as she does that, she breaks apart clods of dried soil. This is who I am. How can I go? Like they, the guards from the mine, pull out my potato plants. They will have to pull me out. Have you ever seen a potato plant pulling itself out? I cannot. I will die. Here, and the word here is not uttered. Who I am with my bones, I will be. Once again, here is not uttered like I am now. Through the lens of modern politics, this woman has been portrayed as an environmentalist and as an enemy or an ally, depending on who speaks. Both detractors and supporters use what I have been calling the grammar of conversion if secularized. They separate Maxima, the human, from land, natural resource, and then link both through a relation, property or possession, legal or illegal. However, the refusal to sell may include another relation, one from where woman, land, lagoon, or plants, rocks, soils, animals, lagoons, humans, creeks, canals become inherently together, an entanglement of entities needy of each other in such a way that, pulled apart, they would become something else. Conceived through this relation, the refusal to sell may also imply the refusal of the grammar that conceives entities as individual bodies, units of nature or the environment, which these entities are not when part of each other. There are no earth beings in Maxima's refusal. Nevertheless, like earth beings with Runakuna, her impossible separation from place also enacts what I have called uncommon nature, an assemblage of entities intra-becoming with each other and refracting individuation in such a way that translating them into units would require, literally, the use of force. Uncommon nature simultaneously coincides with, differs from, and exceeds, also because it is with humans, the object that the state, the mining corporation, and environmentalists translate into resources exploitable or to be defended. Thus, Maxima. She stays because staying she is. The redundancy reveals the relation where both place and Maxima emerge from. One where she's not the subject of the land, which is not her object. Her response exceeds the logic of profit and gain, certainly, and also that of the environment and its defense. If she is an environmentalist, and I think she is not only such. When Maxima explains her being with the land in impossible detachment, their being together through with crops, rain, soil, animals, entities that are the relation, this explanation I propose exceeds the limits of the property concept, where she nevertheless meets the mind in confrontation. Of course, her words can be heard through a habitual subject and object grammar, but her silences, which I have filled with words in brackets, also suggest that there's not only one grammar to her refusal to sell the land the mind wants. As a tool to perform onto-epistemic openings, not only suggests that entities or even the order of things may also be other than what they are. It is not a formula to add to a list. Rather, not only opens rooms for presences that could challenge what we know, the ways we know it, and even suggest our impossibility of knowing without such impossibility canceling those presences, because not only allows entities to both fold into and exceed each other. Like the sacred mountain and earth being, whose overlaps and intra-accesses make me think. Allowing for complex incommensurability, not only and the other negativities, uncommons the anthropo-not-seen, inhabit the a-plural vocation of Strathern's partial connections, more than one, less than many. That's a phrase you know. Yet not only, like Haraway Cyborg, also works to indicate that a relation can be an entity, the partial connection as an entity, not only the coming together of two distinct entities, human and mountain, or Maxima and her land, also an entity that is not without the relation that makes it. Maxima as an interrelational becoming with what exceeds nature and human, because they become together. The guardians of the lagoon, or Ayllu, as uncommon nature, because that nature includes humans, which thus are not only such. A monstrous emergence that challenges usual categories and opens life to possibilities beyond those categories, while also remaining with them, imploding taxonomies and also being with them relentlessly, not only. That's it.